We are never far from those whom we despise due to this. We'll never really be close to the people we love. The haunting thoughts of the young Englishman go on and on as he sets sail for a remote South Atlantic island to work as a meteorologist. While his thoughts drown him, Captain Axel approaches him and lights a cigarette. When Captain Axel inquires about the former weather official, Gruner responds coldly that the man they're looking for died from typhus. Gruner appears unconcerned by their presence and walks around naked. Irritated, Captain Axel and the young man leave the lighthouse. When Captain Axel bids him goodbye, the man wanders around the island as he considers life ahead of him there, as he must dwell into the intensity and direction of the winds for 12 hours and finds the previous meteorologist's diary, revealing his name as Alder. Inside he sees sketches, a photograph of Alder's wife, and even a lighthouse drawing with strange creatures beside it. The next morning he finds strange rock circles on the sand. He then heads near the coast with the telescope to start work. As he peeks through the binoculars, he sees the naked man doing a stretch as preparation for a long day of doing nothing that night. However, the noises grow louder and louder with scratching and growling silences until suddenly, a reptilian hand appears at the bottom of the door, which he immediately steps on, causing the unknown creature to become agitated. When he hears more, he hides under the floorboards. While they try to enter his cabin, they attack his place but notice no one inside. When the footsteps stop, he looks through a small hole in the floorboards doors. The creature peeps. Fearful, he locks himself underground for the entire night, calling Gruner the next day pleading to be let into the lighthouse, but Gruner refuses, determined to fight. He heads back home and spends the entire day reinforcing it with a newfound rifle among the bag. Into the cabin the man feels ready to fight against the unknown monsters. The night comes, and the swarm of beasts starts appearing from the darkness, slowly approaching. He runs away from his burning house because there are too many to handle and the fire makes them flee, but it burns the cabin. Fortunately, it rains before the cabin completely burns down. The next day he sees Gruner leave the lighthouse and discreetly follows him down to the rocks. When he is about to ambush Gruner, a blue female sea creature attacks him, and he points his gun at her. Gruner stops him from shooting her by showing she is a vulnerable friend for the sea creature to recognize him as one. They head into a friend's cabin a little while later to gather his supplies. He realizes that the previous weather official didn't die from typhus but from the sea creatures, but Gruner tells him that they need to head back to the lighthouse because it's getting close to sunset, and the creatures might attack. They lift the supplies into the beacon, and after a long walk, a friend passes out. One morning friend is awakened, licking his hand to try to heal his burns. It turns out that he's been sleeping for 2 days. Friend then finds Gruner and takes an inventory of their ammunition, and explains to him that the creature he calls a toad is like a dog who will not abandon her master no matter how cruel he is. Friend gazes at her, fascinated by her existence, giving her the impression that she's different from the others, but Gruner warns him not to trust her completely, believe, and takes him up to the top. Friend, who wonders why Gruner chose to stay on the island when he had the opportunity to leave when his friend arrived. However, Gruner tells him he will never return to the civilized world now that he is a master of his destiny. Still, a friend tells Gruner that he will come aboard when he sees the next ship come by, to which Gruner wishes him good luck later that day. While she ignorantly eats a candle and he's trying to explain the use of a candle, Gruner calls him up and orders him to bring his rifle that night. Fred watches Gruner prepare for the attack, and the older man instructs him on what to do and fires the flare gun, signaling the beginning of a long night. On the other hand, while the female creature wails into the sky, a crowd of sea creatures barrels toward them, and Gruner starts shooting the terrifying swarm of sea monsters. The next day Gruner is enraged at his friend's ineffectiveness, telling him to fetch water instead. Friend then gets the water, and when he comes back, he hears a pounding and wailing in Gruner's room and, to his surprise, sees Gruner thrusting himself into the sea creature. He then immediately leaves. Later that day Gruner and friend eat lunch. An awkward silence breaks the tension as he bangs the table, telling a friend that he only has one last chance. That night Gruner catches the attention of the creatures as he takes the flare gun. When the monsters appear, a friend is frightened again, causing Gruner to lock friend outside on the balcony, leaving him to fend for himself against the monsters. Despite hearing gunshots and friends' pleas outside, Gruner falls asleep as the sun rises. Gruner is surprised to see their friend alive. Gruner is surprised to see friend creatures attack several nights in a row, forcing them to keep vigil. Days are always the same, nights are getting longer, and only nature keeps them sane. They coexist where their friend's everyday task is to fetch water while Gruner maintains their weapon. One day, a friend speculates that the creatures are returning to the lighthouse to reclaim the female sea creature and visits his old fated cabin to reclaim some of his belongings, only to discover how he has changed his appearance. As he looks in a mirror, he trims his beard, hoping to have some sense of his old self. On his way back to the lighthouse, he comes across a massive whale skeleton and picks up a piece. Still, there are no attacks that night, making him believe that the laws between the fighting are often worse than the battles themselves, but they still take advantage. As he touches her cold skin, he grows to like the strange being and gives her the name Enorus, while Gruner uses her for his ends as a servant and sex slave. One evening Gruner invites a friend to play chess. As they play, the young man shares his observations and hypothesis on the existence of sea creatures. However, Gruner asks him to shut his mouth and play, urging a friend to perform a checkmate. Gruner then picks up his gun and points an attack. They run into the higher point of the lighthouse as more and more monsters arrive. They fight with rifles but get overwhelmed as the attack comes too suddenly. Still, they decide to go up to the lantern pane, where the light illuminates. Unfortunately, Gruner is badly bitten on the foot as he flees upstairs after locking himself inside the pane. That morning, Enorus takes care of Gruner's bent foot as she sticks her tongue into the wound. They cannot survive another war as they are running out of supplies and ammunition, and later that day a friend notices a ship in the distance. While roaming, he immediately runs inside to get the flare gun. Afraid of having no one to hate, Gruner restrains friends. As he is about to shoot, pinning him to the ground, Daenerys tries to protect his friend, which enrages Gruner. A little later, a friend finds a way to communicate with Daenerys by showing her a boat that he carved out of bone in the hopes that she would understand. Daenerys then leads him to an abandoned rowboat on the shore away from the lighthouse. At the lighthouse, the young man tells Gruner about the boat, but Gruner says he knows about it, informing him that a Portuguese man used it to escape a shipwreck, but he also claims the ship's cargo contains dynamite, but he assumes it's all waterlogged. Meanwhile, a friend is interested in diving into the shipwreck with an atmospheric diving suit, but Gruner disapproves, telling him that his proposal is a suicide mission. One afternoon, the young man paints the rowboat hoping to make it work. He then hears a howling from a distance, only to find Daenerys enjoying it. A friend and Daenerys Gruner are watching back at the lighthouse while a friend reads a book. Gruner hands him a diving suit and changes his mind after witnessing what they did in the pool, secretly hoping that his friend will die in the attempt due to jealousy. That the next day they row out to the shipwreck using the boat. The young man explains a rope tug is their only way of communicating while a friend is underwater, telling Gruner that he will tug the rope 3 times the string from the boat. While underwater, friend finds the container and immediately hooks them up. After hooking several small boxes, a friend finds an infant sea creature peeking through his suit, causing him to fall. Gruner is just watching the rope, on the verge of abandoning friend. However, the young man releases himself from the suit and swims into the boat where Gruner immediately. Others contain dry enough explosives to use. Winter is approaching. Friend and Gruner devise a plan to entice as many creatures as possible into the lighthouse before detonating the planted dynamite in the hopes of scaring them away. However, that night, no one attacked. 3 weeks pass in the blink of an eye, and Gruner is growing impatient while waiting for the big attack. A friend finds Gruner freezing outside, still waiting in desperation for the creatures. When a friend and Grunter are waiting for Enorus's catch for their lunch, Gruner kicks her and blames her for telling her kind about their plan to scare them. The angry man grabs his friend's shirt and tells them that their new plan is to leave the door open, luring them inside for an ambush that night. The friend leaves the door open while watching it, and Gruner takes the upper ground, preparing to detonate. Following a friend's speculation, Gruner drags Daenerys beside him, forcing her to wail to attract the creatures. Meanwhile, a sea creature attacks friend at the main door. He manages to get away from them, but more creatures are coming in. He rushes upstairs while informing Gruner that they're now inside the lighthouse. The creatures attack, but Gruner is unable to detonate the explosives, causing a friend to sprint to the top. When the friend wakes up the next day, he immediately searches for Gruner and wakes him up. The young man is relieved when Gruner moves and starts singing a song that he joins this time. Meanwhile, there is massive chaos around the beacon. Gruner uses a spear to finish off the wounded and dying toad on the beach after seeing one of the dead creatures wearing a necklace. Later that evening, while they wait for the next attack, a friend hears Daenerys and several other creatures mourning the loss of their species. Gruner approaches him and explains that he rescued Daenerys as a baby trapped in a net years ago, believing she owed him her life. Enorus vanishes, but Gruner assures him she will crawl back as always to be rescued. On the other hand, Gruner is still preparing for an explosion to continue scaring away the beasts, but there is no attack that evening. One time, as a friend fixes Gruner's mess while the older man sleeps, he discovers a wedding photo of Gruner with the words "Love, Love, Love" written on the back. He recognizes that the woman in the image is the same as the woman in the diary, realizing that Gruner is the former weather official and that Gruner isn't including the reason for his visit to work. There is only work done to stay alive. A friend then goes into the shorts to remove the carved boat when he sees a child sea creature suddenly approach him. Behind the child is Inaris, who appears more confident and boldly. Together with her troops, friend notices that they want a truce, But Gruner does not and only wants Annery's back, but she refuses. He repeatedly echoes no one leaves Gruner. Daenerys looks at his friend with doubt and disappointment, leaving him alone as Gruner fires at them. Friend pursues him and, after a struggle, throws him onto the ground and stabs his leg. Enraged, Gruner stands, gains the upper hand, and tries to murder him with an axe, but a friend calls him by his real name and tells him he is not a murderer. A few months later, the next ship arrives to bring over the friend's replacement. Upon witnessing a shocking state of existence, the captain mistakenly calls him Gruner, which he doesn't bother to correct. Gruner leaves his friend with an unwavering legacy of taking his place. The young man keeps his role, thinking this is the peace he is looking for. He left one mysterious past behind only to discover the same thing on an island he was fleeing, seeking peace through nothingness, but in place of silence, he discovered a monster-plagued inferno. Ultimately, he finds peace after learning that there is no such thing as life without love, hopes without love, or humanity without love. If you like the video, subscribe to the channel for more.